Right, so obviously today what we're gonna do is we're gonna go and look at the BimlBundle. So we're gonna unleash the power of BimlBundles. And I'm personally quite excited about this feature. Having worked with the team that's built the BimlFlex solution, we put a lot of effort and thought into the BimlBundles. And as I show it to you in BimlStudio, hopefully what you'll see is the power of BimlBundles gives you a whole different level of collaboration and coding experience in BimlStudio. So the agenda today, what we're going to do is I'm just going to talk to why we at Verigence, why we actually created BimlBundles in the first place and the reasoning behind that. Give you a bit of a background of what we did and where we started with it. Then I'm going to give you an overview of what a BimlBundle is, where you want to use it, and how we're going to use it in a demo. So before I start in the demo, I'm going to talk about what I'm going to actually show you in the demo. And then we're going to get heading. We're going to write some Biml code. And I'm going to put it all together for you in a Biml demo. So the first thing I'm going to do is just talk about, why BimlBundles. What we need to do first is kind of go back about why Verigence decided to build BimlFlex. So BimlFlex is obviously our enterprise solution, but why did we actually decided to build BimlFlex in the first place? So we've had a number of our customers look at BimlStudio and Biml as itself, and some of you Biml developers will probably relate to this. And they came back to us and said, well, you know what, regardless of we use Biml and hand coding, hopefully they're using Biml, but if we use Biml, there's still a big learning curve, and we still have to go and spend quite a bit of time writing a framework, building the ETL itself. I think we all know that the biggest part of any data warehouse project, roughly about 70%, is all just in building ETL, bringing data into the data warehouse, or and regardless of what data project you have. And we want to bring down the time of actually building the ETL, bring that way down so that you can spend a lot more of your time building the things that really matter, the intelligence side of the business. And then we also looked at development cost. And on average, and this is all sort of the research we've done, on average it seems like there's about a 5 times development cost, and that's the people cost, the people building the data warehouse. It's 5 times more than the software costs, whether it is buying a SQL Server license, buying a BimlStudio license. You still have about 5 times the cost in the development cost on top of that. So we really have to address that as the industry, but especially from a Verigence point of view. And that's why we built BimlFlex, and BimlBundles is an offshoot from BimlFlex. So what you can do with BimlBundles, as you'll see in the demonstrations, you can go and build your own solution or your own framework, and then go and use that and sell that onto your customers. So why did we create the BimlBundle? So as I explained to you about BimlFlex, we had a look at it and we said, well, creating the BimlBundle or creating BimlFlex in its own right, what did we want it to be? So we had a look at the competitors in the market, and we had a look at all of them, and we went, what do they do that we don't like? And most of the people, organizations out there that actually have built a framework and have built a solution, what they've done is they've built a black box. And then if you want to customize or change that, now they all advertise the fact that it's easy to do. But the reality is that most of them have built this black box that you just cannot get into, you can't work around it. So we said, well, we want to have a solution that is extensible. So you can build your core framework, but then have the ability to extend that out. We also need to make sure that it's flexible in the same way as Biml is flexible, that you can pretty much do anything with Biml that you want to. We want to make sure that the BimlBundles and BimlFlex allows you the same sort of flexibility. And if you look at the orange bit of the sort of gauge there, that'll give you a bit of an idea of how much emphasis we've put on that feature set. Then we move over to the right hand side there. One of the things that was important to us was deployment. Now, if you've written any Biml code, you know that the fact that to deploy Biml code or Biml files to your customer, you have the risk there where the customer or the developers of the customer or even somebody from your own organization could make a small mistake that has a massive impact on that code base. So the fact that you want to deploy the code, it's so much easier to take all of your Biml code, as I'll show you very shortly, wrap it all up, and then just send that across to your customer. The next thing is obviously we want to protect our IP code in the same way as if you're writing and putting a lot of effort in building a framework. What you want to do is you want to make sure that you can protect your own code base. So obviously a big part of why we created BimlBundles is to protect it. And what I'm going to show you today is once we build the BimlBundles and make them ready for deployable, it is actually just a zip file. If you want that encrypted, you can send that off to Verigence. We can then encrypt that bundle for you and send it back to you. In the long run, we're actually putting a web service in place where all you need to do is upload the Biml bundle to the web service and it'll send it back down to encrypted. So let's have a look at the Biml bundle overview here. So what we're going to do today is we're going to build a source to staging bundle effectively. And what we're going to do is we're going to first build a Biml file or use a Biml file that just connects to the source, grabs the metadata from the source, and you must have seen some of these solutions out there already. Take that metadata, build some staging tables from that, deploy the staging tables, and then use that same metadata to build some very simple staging packages that just goes from source to target. And that's the Biml code we're going to write. I'll show you a couple of variations on that code, and then we take that code and let's just say that is your entire framework that you want to deploy. I'll then show you how to create a manifest. Again, very simple and easy to do. Create a manifest that allows you to build the bundles, and then what we'll do is we'll extend the manifest out to allow you the ability to define extension points, and then we'll compile all of the bundle into a bundle and we'll deploy that. So what are we going to do? As soon as I get into the demo, I'm going to just show you this here real quick. I'm just going to reuse some code. I've gone onto BimlScript.com and I grabbed that sort of virtual chapter from Scott Curry. It's got all the code there in BimlScript.com. I said, well, that's my starting point. Don't want to go write any Biml. So I copied all that Biml, created the initial solution. Taking that Biml, I'll then just go over real quick, create a manifest, which is effectively just an XML file. We'll then have a little batch file that builds that bundle. And then we'll deploy the bundle to the solution or to our project that we're going to be deploying to the customer. We'll open that bundle up. We'll look around it a little bit, and then I'll go back. I'll add some extension points and talk through extension points for you. And then very briefly, I'm going to talk about automated delivery and just show you real quick about a couple of things that we're going to do. Automated delivery or the continuous integration is a subject by itself. We don't have enough time today to go through it, but I'll just give you a bit of a flavor of what you can do with that. So we're going to go ahead now and do the demo. So as I said, before I show you this, I'll just show you the web page here. So this is the code that I started using. So if you go to BimlScript.com, you pretty much just have to search, I think, for source to staging, and you'll get this article here by Scott Curry. But effectively, I've grabbed all of this code that he's provided for us here, and I've just copied it into BimlStudio. And that's my starting point. So we've got a couple of files here. I'll talk you through the files real quick. The first one is just an environment file, and all of this stuff is hard-coded. If you're going to build your framework here, you'll hook all of this up into metadata, and obviously you can BimlStudio comes with the metadata options down the bottom here that you can add your metadata and then bring that in. And all I've got here is the change from Scott's code is that I'm just pointing to AdventureWorks LT, and I'm not going to point to the whole AdventureWorks database. And then the first file here, as I said, I'm going to import some metadata. So again, I'm connecting to the source. And again, the change between the code that you'll have on the website and my code is that I'm using the external data access get database schema instead of the import DB. It's a little faster and a little bit more flexible. And then the only other change to Scott's code is I just made this little bit over here to say is nullable true. Going into my staging environment, I really don't care about nullability. And then the rest of the code is exactly the same. So what he's done here is he said, well, any column that's an ANSI string or a varchar, I'm going to want to convert them to Unicode further on. So I'll convert this code to live. And again, this is the standard Biml development experience in BimlStudio. This is just showing you that as a developer, you are writing this code, you're testing this code, and then once you've tested it, we'll bundle it all up. So I've got all the tables coming in here. The next thing I want to do is, there's a little script here, which I'm not really going to go into. I'll just make it live, which effectively creates a SSIS package that deploys all the tables. I don't use that method, I use a different method. But this will just drop a master table deploy package in there. Now we get into the, I suppose, the meat of the project, which is your load packages. Again, I'll open this up and I'll just show you the couple of things that I've changed from the code that's on the web page. The first thing is this for each loop, which effectively goes rootnode.tables, which if you look at this, it's going to go rootnode.tables, and it's going to say for every one of these tables, go and create a package. Now this for each loop was down here in the data flow, in the code that's on the web page. So I want to have multiple packages, not one single package. And then I've added these little placeholders here of where I'm going to put extension points later on. But apart from that, all of this code is exactly the same as what you'll see on BimlScript.com. Again, I'll convert this to live just to test it. And what should now happen is all of my sourced staging packages should drop in here. And they're very simple packages, right? So if I open up the address one here, just show you the code, it's just retrieve rows, load rows. That's all they are. What I've also added, which is different to what you'll see on the web page, is because I have multiple packages, I wanted to create a batch and a project. So the batch file effectively just looks through all the packages now, and it just creates an execute package task. So it's going to create a batch file that's going to have execute package tasks. And by the way, all of this code will be on BimlScript.com. So don't worry about it. You can take your time later on to look at the code. And then last but not least, I'm going to create a project. And again, not a lot happening here. Again, going through all the root node, the packages, creating a package, and then just hard coding the connections here. So I've kept the hard coding in here. Again, if it's a metadata driven project, you'll have all of this hooked up to your metadata. So I'm going to convert this to live. So now this is normally where your project would start or stop depending on how much code you're going to write. But I now have a project, and I have a batch, and I have some source staging tables here. And I'm going to now deploy this. This is my solution. I'm happy with that. I'm now going to deploy that to my customer. You'll see I've got a couple of other packages here, and files here. I'll talk to that in a little bit. Okay, so how do I now get this to my customer? Okay, so the first thing I need to do is I need to create a deployment manifest. And it's pretty easy to do. So again, it's just an XML file of a .manifest extension. And the first thing I need to do here is I need to tell it which files do I want to compile into this bundle, or no, let me rephrase that. Which files has been compiled into the bundle, and how should I interact with that? So I'm just going to add the files here, and I'll talk you through this. So we have a couple of different options here. So the first one here is just saying, inside of this bundle, there is a file called create table metadata, which is the one that that brings the tables in. The initial build action, in other words, when I open the bundle, this file should be in a live mode. So it should be live. And then, is this file visible to the public? So will the user be able to see this file and interact with this file? So the default of it is obviously private. So these files down the bottom here has been marked as private. I don't want the users to even see these files. Then is build action editable? What this means is that it will, and I'll show this to you in a little bit. It means that when I open the bundle, does my user have the ability to toggle this file on and off? So is this file able to be toggled on and off? And then just a display name. In other words, what do I want the user to see the name for? So this could be an internal file name, and this is what is the name that I want the user to see. And then a description of just display. So I've got a couple of files here, and I'll talk you through those files in the bundle. And then I have down the bottom here, I've got some files. So I've got a couple of include files that I've set and marked as reference. But long story short, here are all my files, and it's all bundled up. I'll save the bundle. You'll see down the bottom here, I'm going to do extension points, but I'm not going to do that right now. I'm going to do this in a couple of stages. The next thing I want to do is compile this bundle. Now, I'd like to tell you that this is very difficult, but it's actually not. All you need to do is take the bundle, and using 7-zip, we basically tell it which files, including the manifest, do we want to zip up. And that's it. And then what we do is we copy it. We just have this little batch file that copies it to the destination. Now, as I said, that this bundle file effectively is just a zip file that if you send that to us, what we will do is we will encrypt that zip file with the right key, and then basically you get an encrypted zip file back. That's all the bundle is. So let's go ahead and run this. So I'm going to go into my solution here. So here is that, I'll delete that file there, just that bundle file here. So here's my manifest, 7-zip's little utility, and I'll just run this as admin here. So I'll run as administrator there, and that's it. So now what it's done is it's created this bundle file here. And again, as I said, if I open this, open the archive here, you'll see it's just a zip file. But it has also copied the file up to this project here, okay? And now I'll open up this file here, this project. Now the first time you deploy the bundle, so the first time that you open up as a new solution, a new project, so what you'll do is you'll create a whole new project, and then, so this is for your customers, this is the initial setup. The first thing you need to do is connect the bundle to the solution. Now, so all I'm going to do in here is go and right click here and say add existing item. And because I've copied the bundle here, I'll now go and say I want to connect a BimlB file. There's my bundle. I'll open it. It's connected. I'll save all, close BimlStudio, and then open it up again. When this opens up, what you'll see is you'll actually see all of those files that I've marked to be live will actually automatically be executed and become live. So the whole solution will look exactly the same as the solution that I've had in my project. So let's have a look at what that looks like once it opens up. All right, so there we go. What you'll see here is you'll see all of the things that you saw when I was having Biml, but there's no files there. There's no actual Biml files visible. And then all it is, it has this bundle. So what I'm going to do is open up the bundle here. Here are those options. Remember the manifest where I said the customer can toggle this on and off. So what can happen here is the customer go and I'll toggle something on and off for you real quick. I'm going to toggle off these files here. So I'm going to say, switch that off. And as simple as that, those files are now out of live, and let's bring it back in. There they come. It's busy compiling, and there's the files all back. Okay, so that's how your customer will interact with your files in your bundle. But as I said, we're talking about extensibility here and flexibility here. Good thing is the customer doesn't have any code to dig through. He's just working with a couple of toggle switches here. But we want to be able to extend it out. I'm going to go into a lot more of this code base in a second here, but I'm going to go ahead back and just add some extension points here. If you look at this extensions here, you'll see that this is empty. There's no extensions over here or extension points in here. So let's head over and add some extension points, and then we'll come and look at this solution in a little bit more detail. Before I go into the code and add the code, I'm going to go into this file here, and I'm going to go and add some extension points here. And I'll talk you through this in a second. So I'll zoom out here just a little bit. So extension points effectively is just placeholders. So what we're doing here is we're defining a little bit. So that's the metadata here that we're defining, or the configuration. And what we're doing here is we're saying, I'm going to create an extension point, and I'm going to call it pre-process. And I'm going to create a second one called source pipeline, but I'll just go through the pre-process one. And again, here's the display name, and here's a little description of when the customer hovers over it, they can see a little bit of a description. I'm going to pass some parameters into it. And in this case, I'm going to pass in table of a type string. Now this type could be an AST table node. You could actually pass in a whole Biml object into this extension point. And I'm just going to pass it in two strings, one called table, one called connection. And then you have the option here with new file template to provide the customer with almost like a little bit of a helper file, a method here. So you can say, when this customer creates the new extension point, this is what the first time he connects it, give him a bit of an example, a starting point. Okay, so in this case, I'm going to give him a truncate table sample point with the execute SQL. And then I have a second extension point here called source pipeline. I'll just save that. Now I've got to head over to my Biml framework. And I've got to go into my Biml framework and say, where in my framework do I want to connect or hook up these extension points? So let me head back over here, and I'm going to go into my create load packages file here. So the first one I'm going to do, if you think about a source staging ETL process, normally what you would do is you would load data from a source into a destination. But before you do that, if you want to rerun this package, you really want to either truncate your staging table or delete it. You want to have a pre-process action here. And sure, you want to code that up, but maybe you just want to give the person the ability to code up their own one. So at this point here, I'm going to add an extension point or a placeholder for extension point here. And I'm going to talk you guys through this, so just bear with me a little bit. It's going to get a little technical here for a minute. So we have two ways of adding an extension point. The one is called extension point for bundle, and the other one is with output. In other words, I'm calling this extension point, and this extension point is going to provide output back to me. And the reason for that is that sometimes you want to call into an extension point. And if you think about this from a Biml point of view, is if you are going to inject Biml code or Biml fragments or nuggets of code in the middle of a pipeline or in the middle of a package pipeline, is you sometimes need to, like SSIS, you have to connect the source to it, and you have to connect it to the next object in that flow. So you need to say, well, does something need to connect to this component? And does this component, the next component down, needs to now connect to it? So what we're doing here is we are going to create a pre-process extension point, and we're going to pass it in a target of source. Again, hard-coded. Not a good practice, but I'm hard-coding it just for example here. This normally is driven from metadata, and the next one is. And then it's going to come and give me an output of pre-process output that I'm going to be working with. And then I'm going to pass it in two parameters, one called schema qualified name and one called source, which is the connection name. Again, hard-coded. When it comes back, I'm going to check, was there an extension point? So for this target, is there an extension point? And if the answer is yes, I'm going to go and grab that output, look for, in that dynamic object here, there should be something called output path name. And if it's there, go and actually display the pre-process. Okay, so now I've injected any Biml into at that position. Because I've got an output path coming in here, my next control flow object, which is a data flow, will actually need to connect to it. So again, I'm sitting over here, I'm saying I'm going to code up some precedence constraint here to check if this output path variable, if that is not empty, in other words, there was a extension point, I need to add a precedence constraint. Okay, so now I've hooked up that pre-process with this data flow task here. All right, let's move over to the source pipeline. Now, the source pipeline means that you could have a standard process here, and we use this a lot. I mean, in BimlFlex, we must have over 60 extension points, because to provide that flexibility to your customer, as we've provided to our customers, is you almost have to say, well, is it possible for somebody to want to change something or add something into this pipeline? If the answer is yes, well, add a piece of code. So here's a piece of code that doesn't have any output, right? So I'm just going to pop this in here. So this is the simplest way to call an extension point, which is simply going, call extension point for bundle, doesn't have an output. In other words, if it exists, if the source pipeline exists for a target of table name, just to give an idea of what we do within BimlFlex, and you probably want to do this if you're going to be building extension points. You want to be building this from the ground up. You want to, if you think about this, and in all coding about object inheritance, right? Let's just say you want to create a piece of code that you just don't want to target the table for. You want to target all the tables that belongs to the batch. Then what you need to do is you need to make sure that your extension point has the ability to inherit target names. So if you're passing in a table, it needs to do one thing. If I'm passing in a batch, it needs to do something else. So you might want to pass in the batch and then say, oh, if it's a batch, you're going to target. So the target, it's important that you think that through a little bit, because if you have 1,000 tables and you want to have every one of those tables do something specific, you really don't want to go and create 1,000 extension points. And then I'm going to pass it in a variable called table.name. Okay, and that's it. So now what I've done is I've hooked up the extension point placeholders or hooks in my code, and I can now save this, and there it is. I've now extended my framework out and made it configurable and customizable. So I'm just going to head over here, and again going to go and build the bundle out and deploy the bundle. So I'm just going to head over here and just run this as admin. All right, that's done. I'll head back over here. I'll have to close this and open this again. As I said, the bundles don't refresh. I'll close this solution and I'll open it up. Now, that may seem unintuitive, but you don't deploy a bundle every 5 seconds, right? The bundles, we deploy bundles once every 2-3 weeks. We might add features to bundles and deploy them out. So it's really not every time you make a change, you deploy the bundle. So we'll open this up again, and now we'll have the ability to actually go and extend it out and put those extension points in. So everything should still look the same as we left it last time. The only difference here is we have the ability to go and add an extension point. An extension point, again, we'll open up the bundle here, and I'll go to extensions, and now you'll see that I have this ability here, and here's my extension points that I have. If I hover, so if I look at pre-process, you can create a new extension point by clicking this, but you'll see and it also shows you which ones you've created already. The same as source pipeline. So let's have a look at the pre-process. So here is one I've prepared earlier. I'll click on that, and I'll just talk you through this real quick. Okay, so this is pretty much from the example that I've built, and I'm just gonna go and remove this because now I'm targeting the source, and I'll save this. So all I'm doing here is I'm saying for this bundle, define this extension point for this bundle. The extension point name is a pre-process. I'm targeting source. It's got a string and a string as a parameter, and then I'm just doing a truncate table here. Okay. So if I now go and I look at my packages here, if I were to open up the sales address LT, what I'll see inside of the sales L tree, if I go and output, do auto output layer, there's nothing there. However, if I right click now and say refresh on this, it will now go and read that extension point because it's now, I should probably close this, right? Yeah, there we go. And I'll do auto layer there. So what you can do, see there is now that extension point is part of it. So it's grown an extension point. So it's in your live view so the customer can actually see the extension points being added to their Biml code. If I go and right click here, this is something that I want to show you guys real quick. If I go and say view in Biml Script Designer, what you'll see here is you'll see actually all of your code. You might now say, well, hang on, all of my code is there and I actually don't want my code to be visible, right? That's the whole point of bundles, is possibly to protect your IP. Well, I'll show you in a little bit how you can do that. How you can just kind of obfuscate your code into include. What you will see here, however, is that none of this code. So I'm going to just select all of this and I'll hit delete. The code is read-only. Nobody can make a change to the code here. And if I go and hit update preview here, you'll see that the extension point, so we'll see the Biml, the output of the Biml. So the output or the Biml that gets outputted is always visible to your customer, even if you're using BimlFlex. You know, the BimlFlex that we coded up, if you use that framework, you can hit update preview. You can actually output the Biml itself, and you can do with that Biml what you want. You know, that Biml, the code creating the Biml is your IP, not the output. And then there you'll see there's the extension point added there. So last but not least, I'll pop back into this bundle and I'll go into source pipeline. Again, I've created one here and I'll remove that. And what now will happen is every single package, or actually not every single package, just the address package. I'm targeting a very specific table here because I'm passing a table. Only the address package now will have this derived column added. So I've saved that. I'll refresh this and I'll open up. It's just busy refreshing down the bottom here. I should see the derived packet coming in there. There's my derived column there. And if I open up, let's just say address revisions, I should not see that derived column, but I will see the other extension point there, but I won't see the derived column extension point there. So that's how you can build extension points and make them very, very specific to what you want to target inside of your framework, so you can make certain things. So, you know, just this morning, I had a customer call me up and say, you know, I've got BimlFlex and I want to use your, I want to be able to connect to Salesforce. How do I do that? We are actually in contact with an organization to do a whole bunch of these connectors. But I said to him, well, actually, all you need to do is we have got an override or an extension point that allows you the ability to override the source. So you can give it whatever custom component you are using. You can just say, go and override that source with this extension point. And because we've got object inheritance switched on, you can define one extension point and make it visible to that entire project so that you can override that. Let's head back over into our bundle code here. Actually, I'll stay over here. So one of the things that you want to do when you're building a framework and you're building bundles and things like this, you want to think about deployment, you know, because encapsulating a lot of the code, you know, it's easy when you use Biml and you are used to Biml code to go and say, oh, I'll just quickly change this, I'll quickly change that. Well, bundles makes that different, right? Because if you're deploying your bundle code, the customer can't just quickly go and run this file or that file or change this thing or that thing. So what we have to have the ability is, we still need the ability to actually call into the bundle to say, well, there's a file in the bundle called X, Y, and Z. You can go and call that file and get the output of that individual file. So what I've done to kind of simulate that for us is I've created this file here called create table script, and all this file does, and it's in the bundle, and I'll go head over to the bundle to show you how that works. And effectively all this file does, it does a root node.tables, and it just gets the drop and create DDL. So effectively it's going to give me my, I can update preview this here so you can see. It's actually just going to give me my create table scripts, right? Coming down here So basically it just gives me my drop and create table scripts there. Now that's quite useful in a testing and build environment where you may want to go and say, oh, hold on, I want to run that and then I want to build my main package. And then what I have is I have this file here, which when I head over to the bundle, you'll see this file is there. Now this file basically has a couple of neat things in it. The one thing is it's got this this very first command here, which says if it's not background compilation. In other words, only when I'm hitting the build button will this code actually run. So this is background compilation means that the file in here, it doesn't get refreshed every time my bundle gets refreshed. It will only run when I actually hit the build button. And then all I'm doing here is I'm basically grabbing a file and I'm outputting it to create table script in the same directory where my output is. And here is the bit that you need to know. You can use in the same way as you can use call BimlScript, you can now use call BimlScript from bundle. And then what you do is you actually call into the bundle. And as long as you know what the file is, so you may want to set some of this up, you want to call into the bundle. Let me head over to that solution and show you how that all comes together. And we use this again, we use this in BimlFlex. We have this sort of output table DDL here. And we also have an output sort of output all the Biml. So what we do is every time the customer builds, they output all of the SQL code to create their environment, gets output into a file, and then all of the Biml, expanded Biml, not the code, actually also go into a separate file. And that way, when we deploy bundles, we can say to customers, well, compare the code that was output from your previous bundle, deploy the new bundle, and then compare the output from the new bundle, and compare that and make sure that we didn't break anything. And that's what gives you that backward compatibility. So you want to build that into your bundle, I would recommend. So what we can do here is we can switch off the packages, because let's just say we're in a scenario here where we haven't actually created a table yet. So we can actually go and switch off our load packages and just output the SQL and then hit the build button. So I'm going to hit the build button now. And what will happen here is it's not going to go and build any packages. It's just going to build that output DDL. In my results, in my output, this is where I'm outputting the files. You'll see there's an expanded Biml code here. And in here, there is my SQL statement. So this, you can now use any kind of continuous integration to sequence those things together to say, okay, well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually build out my SQL file first, run and deploy that, and then I'm going to go ahead and back and build out my packages. So let me head back there and actually build those packages out for us so we can kind of see what they look like. Let's switch that on. They should pop in a second with all of the extension points, and I'm going to hit the build button here. While they're building, I'm going to head over so we'll wait for them to finish building. There we go. And I'll head over to Visual Studio and reload all. So here are the packages that was built out just now. Open this up, let me bring this across. So there's my batch, and here is my sales LT address. And inside of it, you'll see the extension point was added, and the two extension points was added there. There's my truncate table, and here is my, just give it a second, there's my add metadata. And if I open up the rest, which I'm not going to do right now, but they'll all be there, and you can execute and deploy that. So now, how do you protect your code? Well, apart from compiling your bundle, even if you were to compile your bundle, people can still see your code. So what I've done here is I've created this alternative load package. So I'm going to switch this one off, and I'm going to switch this one on here. And they'll do the same thing. It's just slightly built slightly differently. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to open this up and show you the difference in the Biml code that is now visible to the customer. So they still have the same functionality. However, now what you'll see is that all this customer can see is that you're doing a for each, and you can even wrap that up. But all they can do is they can see, oh, this thing connects to something called create load packages, and this Biml here, they cannot click into it. So although that's an include file, and the code behind that is exactly the same as the other code, because it's one layer down, the customer can't get to the file, so they can't see that code. So that's the one thing that I think you just need to be aware of as you build out your solution is what of the code base do you want to make visible to your customers and not. And that, I believe, is it for the demo. As I said, it's just basically taking your Biml frameworks that you've probably already written and just wrapping it all up into a single bundle that is deployable. And those bundles, I mean, BimlFlex, I think is under 1 meg, all the code bundled up. So it's a tiny footprint and it's just a file copy. Thank you for your time. I really appreciate it. You know, I know sometimes it's not easy making time. I really thank you for your time, and I'll see you the next time. Thank you.